certain month in this cave, Redondo Cave by candlelight, he wrote the Book of Five Rings. Why is that so significant, right? The Book of Five Rings is broken down into the elements of life. You know, water, wind, fire, ground, void. You know, and I reflected as I looked, I reflected these monks, hundreds of thousands of these statues, and each one survived.
Today we take a look at my favorite conversation I had with Tulam in his war room, and we go over to his book collection where we spent a good hour of Tulam telling us the stories of how he was motivated and inspired by these books. But this book in particular, this one book, was Tulam's favorite book. It was his most influential book and had the biggest impact on his life. And he explains all those lessons that are held within these pages. Today's video was sponsored by Mulliganbrothers.com, the best motivational clothing brand in the world, where you can now get the hoodies and the t-shirts with the link in the description, where all the profits go back into making this content possible.
Are you rolling?
Yep.
Yeah, ready when you are.
This is my war room. So the war room encompass all my travels, you know, encompass my studies in warfare. My studies in warfare stems back to samurai. You know, it stems back to Budo, the way of the combat side of being samurai. But it goes off of a code called Bushido. What I like about Bushido, this book right here, Bushido, it talks about Bushido as a path, the way, right? Bushido. Bu means to stop, to intercept, to go to war. Shi is the one who's strong enough to walk this path, and Do is to take your life and to give back for the sake of humanity, which is tied and grounded in Confucianism, because Confucius talks about, you know, we're all flawed as human beings, and through life we must refine ourselves, right? We must better ourselves, and that's what Bushido is, the path. So one of the books that stand out to me is Hakakura. Hakakura is a book that was actually written by two samurais. These samurais had a conversation for 7 years. They would sit there and had a conversation for 7 years. For 7 years, these two samurais talked about what it meant to be samurai. You see, because this book was written during peacetime Japan, when Tokugawa Ieyasu brought peace to 250 years of civil war. So the samurais that used to serve their daimyo now has nobody to really serve. There's no battles, no wars. Tokugawa brought peace. So these two samurais during peacetime Japan reflected on what it means to be samurai. What's unique about this book was this was written 100 years after war-stating periods Japan. War-stating periods. And that was the first time in history that that word Bushido was ever written in literature. Up until then, during war-stating periods, it was simply known as the Way. The Book of Five Rings, as you can see, multiple translations, right? Multiple translations of the book. But Musashi Miyamoto, he was born in the late 1500s, and he was a renowned swordsman, right? He was very skilled in the art of Ishuru, which he wielded the heaven and earth, which is the swords, long sword and short sword, the washitashi and the katana. He was so unconventional of his time in his sword methodology. He dueled for 67 duels and won every single one. And it was said when Musashi reached the age of 35, after he killed so many men, that he reflected on his life and he walked the path of Do, which was now humanity. So what he did was he started becoming a poet, an artist, a gardener. And in his final days, he was a master swordsman who taught his skills Arshiru. And it said that he, in his final years, he retreated to the mountains of Kiyomoto, where he lived with monks in these sacred grounds. And he knew a sickness. He felt a sickness inside of him. It was stomach cancer. He was dying. And for 3 years, he worked in these sacred grounds, and it said that that's where he found his peace. And it was said within a certain hour and certain month in this cave, Redondo Cave by candlelight, he wrote the Book of Five Rings. Why is that so significant, right? The Book of Five Rings is broken down into the elements of life. You know, water, wind, fire, ground, void. So he broke it down into each one of these elements, void being the last, right? So Musashi taught me the teachings of each element, and in the Bushido code, in my path of Bushido, the way of the warrior, I was able to experience life and the lesson of each chapter. When to know one's enemy, to gather intelligence, right? To understand the enemy, the environment, right? Only by understanding the enemy and the environment and intelligence can you effectively kill your enemy, right? Fire is to meet your enemy without fear, right? That comes with a mindset. To fight like you already died, to have no fear of death, to ground yourself, right? Another teaching is ground, to ground yourself in the teachings of education in the way of the warrior, right? Wind, you know, and then void. I tell you, you know, void was the hardest for me, because Musashi says that in order to perceive what is actual truth, you must die to everything of yesterday. You know, and I was suffering, you know, after my time in war, and I was very lost. And I read that book, Void. I never understood what that means, you know. How can you die to everything of yesterday to perceive what is? Well, it actually goes back into Taoism, you know, and Confucianism, where, you know, in life, we create a narrative, right? We live in this dream on what is absolute. So what is absolute is the universe. What's absolute is the mountains, stars, moon, God. That's absolute truth. But what we place on these absolute is a narrative. A tree is only a tree. But we look at this tree and we say, wow, what a small tree. We look at this tree and we say, oh, the tree is not perfect. The tree is perfect. Life is perfect, right? But we throw this narrative. So in life, we come up with a narrative and we travel through this world with our own narratives. You know, you face a struggle, either you learn from it or you repeat this. And when you learn from it, is it really failure? So Musashi in the book of Five Rings, it's just that. You must die to your truth in order to see what is actual. You know, and that comes with a lot of practice, right? So for many years I practiced on this, and now I understand, right? I understand what it means. So during my travels, you know, I started teaching a lot, and after my time in Japan, to close off my war years, you know, I visit Miyamoto Musashi. I went to Redondo Cave, and I climbed that cave. It was a unique morning because, you know, my wife knew that this journey to Kyoto needs to happen. And we were traveling all through Japan. I had this journalist attached to me. I'm Ronin, you know. So that morning, we caught a private flight to Kyoto with one of my real close friends. And we had a private driver, you know, pick us up at the airport. The older gentleman, he was so happy, right, to be driving to see Musashi. And I asked him, you know, why are you excited? And he said, I've never been here, you know, I've never been here before. And he drove me for hours. He drove, and as I looked at the terrain, as we were driving through this kind of misty environment, it was kind of rainy that morning. I was driving through and I was looking at the navigation system. I can see why Musashi retreated to this area. It was secluded, it was in the mountains, so beautiful. And as we poured into the parking lot, I want to tell you, there was a huge statue, like, you know, 4 stories high, this statue of Musashi meditating, and there was Bushido writing all around him. And, you know, and I was so happy. I got out and I started, you know, taking pictures and started video, and then instantly my camera stopped working. You know, and I was pondering on it because I just bought this camera. It worked everywhere else, you know. I started to get upset. And my wife came up to me and she goes, just let it go, enjoy this moment. And you know, when she said that, if I was a Ronin of the past, and I was to teach this Ronin of the future one lesson, it would be just that. To be mindful. Stop worrying about the externals. So, I walked through, the Buddhist, towards the Buddhist ground, a lot of warrior statues. And I walked through, I finally made it to the Shinto Shrine, right? Shinto is tying the ways of the old. And there was a Buddhist monk there, and he gave me this bracelet, and he gave me this book. And then I made my way into this cave where they had a glass exhibit, all Musashi personal stuff. He was an artist, he was a gardener, he was a warrior, and he had heaven and earth there, the dual swords, heaven and earth. And as I walked out, I saw thousands of these Buddhist monuments scattered all through the landscape, ridge line to ridge line. And I reflected, as I looked, I reflected, this survived. Earthquakes, wars. These monks, thousands, hundreds of thousands of these statues, and each one was a different face. When I walked through, and finally I came to the entryway to Musashis Cave, and there was this pagoda. This pagoda was this Japanese stone statue, and it was Bushido writings, warrior writings written from up to down, right? And then I climbed the cave, and I entered and I saw the rock where Musashi wrote the Book of Five Rings. And it was said, that the story was that Musashi, in these sacred grounds, back when he was dying of stomach cancer, he had a torch. He's walking through. It was very slippery grounds because it's islands, right? So Japan is an island. So this used to be underwater and used to be a coastline. So very coral reef, very slippery terrain. And it says that Musashi found this cave. And it was said that there was a boat that washed into this cave, and that's where he entered the cave. And that's where the Book Five Rings is written. Here I am in this cave. And so I took off my shoe and I climbed up the rock, and I sat there. I sat there in meditation style, And what was really unique about that meditation style as I sat on this rock was that this cave entrance was like a canvas, and it overlooked these sacred grounds. So you could almost see the treetops. It was misty that morning. As I sat there, I started meditating, and I remember going into that meditation process because I was there for a reason. And I closed off my warriors with forgiveness. So during that cave, in the spirit of things, that's when I forgave the world and I worked on myself. But what's really unique was that an hour away was Musashi's gravesite. It was said that his loyal retainers in his final moments in his life, when he saw death setting in, when he felt it coming in his body, in this cave, he asked his loyal retainers, his loyal students, to help him to his knees. And it said that Musashi died with sword in hand, because Musashi said in his final moments, life and death is all one and the same. Without life, there's no death. Without death, there's no life. A warrior walks into the afterlife with no fear. So it said that he died in a kneeling position as a warrior. And they said that they buried his body roughly about an hour away by drive, right? And it was in these high grounds in the entrance of this castle with this daimyo, warlord. It was said Musashi asked to be buried there to wave at the future samurais, the warriors, as they walk past, his spirit, as he sit there and watch the future warriors. But let me tell you, when I went to his final resting place, I sat down and I was looking at the error message on my camera, So I took out the battery and I put it back in. Did it at least 100 times in Musashi's Cave. the camera fired up. No errors. You could take that as you want. I just take it as this, a lesson to be present, right? Don't be mindful of the things that are outside your control. You know, and that's what it was. This was outside my control, but yet I'm trying to control an element that I have no control over. The only thing I had control over is me and how I look at that narrative. And what I did was, you know, I remind myself that it was a beautiful morning. So the lessons from Musashi.
Thank you so much for watching the video. The link for Tulam's stuff is linked down below. We'll also put a link for the book as well, so you can read it yourself and absorb these lessons that he is teaching. I was gonna say a massive thank you to Tu and his family. We have a lot more content coming out through this process. We shot over 50 hours with Tu over the week, so there's a lot of stuff there that we need to get our teeth through. What would you guys like to see? Let us know. And also, we are doing more interviews at the moment, so comment down below, tag some people in this. Let people know that we're out there, we're doing interviews, and we want to hear who you want to hear from as well. As always, today's video was sponsored by Mulliganbrothers.com, the best motivational clothing brand in the world, where you can now get the hoodie, the t-shirts, and the book with the link in the description, where all the profits go back into making this content possible. Have a blessed and productive day. Go follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.